My name is Vu Nguyen. I have been in the gaming industry for about 17, 18 years, but I'm actually working in film right now. Um, my first project was EverQuest, working on the original, which a lot of you guys are probably reason you guys are here for is just to kind of get back into the nostalgic D&D type of games. Yeah, so I mean, I started off on the project, I think back in 97, and it was kind of by luck that I kind of got hired by them. I had a friend who was on the project, and she was doing some modeling for them, and she got a job doing some world building for them, and pretty much had me send in my resume through her, and that kind of went on from there. I didn't really fit what they were looking for because I started, they were looking for people who were into like D&D games, and I didn't have much experience with that, but I did do the art well, and so they gave me a chance on that, and that pretty much just ended up working out. I built a couple of zones for them from the beginning, which didn't really turn out too well. I think my first one was Kedge Keep, and then my second one was Kara Isle, and those were just me kind of diving into the tools and learning them and getting more familiarized with them. And I didn't really have a good zone until I think my third zone, which was Unrest. It was either Unrest or Rivervale, but I think Unrest was the one that stuck most with people. It's pretty iconic. They have people have a lot of memories from that zone, and it's one of my favorite zones because it's kind of neat to build a big kind of Victorian mansion and make it scary and haunted, and try to fit some hidden areas in there, trapdoors and fake walls and all that kind of stuff was pretty neat. And then I talked to this about I mentioned this earlier before that the reason that there is a big kind of tunnel that happens when you enter Unrest was pretty much when I got the map from the zone, it was I got the gate entrance showing it was coming from the south end, was pretty much where the entry of the zone was supposed to be. And then later after I built it, one of the designers came and said, hey, the outdoor map has it coming either from the west side or the north side, some other completely opposite direction. So the only way to fix that really with the technology was to pretty much just build that long tunnel that wrapped you all the way back around a different direction just to get in there. So I know people entering, there was always like corpses just sitting right there in the tunnel, people trying to run away from the ghosts and everything like that too. So yeah, a lot of people have memories from that zone, and it's a good one because it's not too high level. You were in your mid-teens and you could go in there and have fun and just kind of farm either on the outside patio or go inside the house. So
how much of it like design did you have from the designers or whatever? Did you just come up with all of the points of interest and layout and stuff like that on your own?
Back then, they just gave me a picture of a house, and that was it. And they said, "Yeah, we have this house. It's kind of shaped like this." And then there was, I think they said they had 2 floors, and they really didn't give me much design. So, like I said, I took more of my platform gaming experience and kind of put it to there. I try to fit in towers on at the corner of the houses, and try to make good floors, and really we didn't have that much design. And back then it was pretty much they gave you a page description of what they wanted, and then you would go in there and you would build it, and then they would go in there afterwards and fill the content up. So very backwards to how things are probably done today. But
I mean, honestly, I've had so much experience. I think maybe at companies that do it more professionally or better or whatever, there's like lots of design docs and blah, blah. But my experience, especially on EQ, is you have a blurb, you have a rough idea. Depending on what was going on in a zone, you may have specific areas that you map out or whatever. But so much of it was just like a back and forth with artists, where artists got creative and weird, and then we were like, "Oh shit, that's really cool," and let's do it. So, you were mentioning, it's funny, you were mentioning Unrest as if it's a place that's not still constantly in use. for the last year that we've been playing, we have a number of alts. We've been in this zone so many times. I've just been in here with two different characters over the last few weeks. This guy's still in here. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
incredible.
I remember that gazebo too. That was kind of fun to make. But yeah, it was just pretty much they gave you an idea, and then you would go in there and build something and do some collaboration with the designer. But a lot of times, pretty much just trying to find something cool,
So
some kind of inspiration.
I mean, now that I have you here, I had a question when I was looking at the design of this zone. I probably won't be able to get up there on this guy without getting more aggro. But I was running around the outside of the house, and it dawned on
Hmm.
me that the house basically that we play in, all of those, little camps and stuff. I mean, it's not a trick. Like, you go in the house, you're in the house. It's when you're hopping out, of the balcony or whatever, it's all there. So it's not like we're going into a little instance or any of that. Uh, you know what I mean?
No,
Like,
it was like it was pretty much a real house. Like it wasn't instance. It was pretty much yeah, just build it and then try to fill up as much of the the house you can. Like I was just trying to get the floors in there and get the little walls and then yeah, I made the little secret door and then the underneath part and fake floor and all that kind of stuff. So I just was just trying to put something that would make it fun for people.
dude, it's outstanding. It's funny. Like, I totally forgot about the trap, the like the fountain of blood or whatever that if you go around the sides of it, you fall into the
Yeah,
pool with
yeah,
the moisture.
yeah.
I fell in there a couple days ago and was like, oh man, seriously? It's so
With
good.
the the mushroom guy in there or something like that they have down there.
Yeah. So the it's interesting how well the gameplay turned out within this for you, kind of coming in and freestyling when you were working on this and building it out. You said it was what, your second or third zone. Was there already a feel like within the team of the gameplay? Were you guys able to kind of play the zone as you were going, or how was that?
No, they were populating it. I mean, I really didn't understand how the game played until it started to come out. Not really having that D&D knowledge. I was mainly a platform guy, so um, you know, Mario, Super Mario, and a lot of those games that I
Yeah.
grew up with. I kind of was just basing things more off platform. So I didn't really understand the gameplay until the game started to come out a year later, and I started to make characters. Well, actually, beta, and started to understand the D&D role playing, and then I got sucked in, and wanted my spells and wanted to level up and everything like that. But a lot of the original gameplays were yeah, more platformy based when I just kind of was freestyling. Um, but yeah, that was one of the more popular ones on the dungeon base. I know a lot of people liked Sebilis too, but I worked on that, but I never got high enough to where I was able to experience the gameplay on that one.
Oh
But
wow.
I know a lot of people enjoyed that dungeon.
Yeah, it's another classic. Seb is one of those ones that it comes up in tons of conversations as well. It's funny. It's oh, man, it's really interesting to see how well some zones like these can turn out despite the limited information up front. You're just kind of going in and being creative. Limited understanding of the gameplay because the game was still in development. You guys weren't necessarily playtesting a lot. Um,
Yeah.
I I think
Sebilis was kind of I kind of did a choose your own adventure type of thing with Sebilis. It's pretty much it broke off. I had the designer said they wanted like to split it off into little sections, so I kind of did the same thing of making it a choose your own adventure. Once you kind of made it past one area, there was like no way back, and you just had to kind of continue to move forward. Did some slippery floors and some little things like that just to kind of make it interesting. But like I said, I never really got a chance to play it normally with a character, so um, I'm kind of disappointed that I never experienced what a lot of people for some reason kind of hold it dear to them.
yeah. So I keep an eye on chat, and I was told I was a little bit low, so apologies for that, folks. I turned it up a bit. The Monty just asked, what was the original idea for the little cave in the water?
Saw that. Well, I had the gazebo they wanted out there, and I put a pond out there, and I just, like I said, just threw a secret room in there, just give people something to explore. Just like a little Easter egg, just something for them just to kind of see something different.
So the thing I was going to say just a second ago was the zones have turned out really well despite the fact that it was it wasn't overly planned. It wasn't something where there was a huge amount of, all right, we've got to very precisely sort of craft this zone based on our understanding of gameplay. And maybe this is just also sometimes I'm a bit lazy, so I'm like, no, this is actually a good way to do it. I like that. We've been working on a little project of our own, and I like that idea of just going in and being creative and then seeing where it takes you. Was that kind of the process with all of the zones?
I mean, like back then, this project was pretty much pioneering, so we really didn't have any experience of what we were supposed to do with a lot of this stuff. And like the group was a lot of entry level people, a lot of new people that haven't been in the industry before. So that was kind of just do it, we just do it and get it out there and see what happens. And if we're creative enough, we'll make it interesting. We had some really good designers, which really made the game really fun. Which had some good spells, had some good loot and everything like that. So we credit those guys with a lot of like the great work that was put in, and there was a lot of other good artists and good designers who built really good zones too. So it was just one of those things that kind of right time at the right place. Everybody, we really didn't have too much to follow upon besides just let's just make something cool, make something people wanted to play. And there were some designers that spent a lot of time playing the games and tuning them and everything like that, so those guys should get a lot of credit. Jeff Zadkin, Ryan Palacio, a lot of the other designers that were there. I mean, Brad McQuaid, always had a lot of his ideas pushed into it about group play and all that kind of stuff too. I never really was involved in the design meetings because being an artist, I didn't have, like I said, I didn't have the design background that those guys did. But yeah, I mean, like I said, we didn't have a playbook to go by, so it was just pretty much everybody just do it the best that they can, try to put your input in and see what happens.
Do you remember who you worked with on like this zone and other zones on the design side?
On the design side on this, it could have been. I mean, I worked with Rick Schmitz as artist. He did a lot of the 2D 2D concepting and the textures on it originally. I don't know who originally wrote the initial design, because I think a lot of people just kind of wrote designs for the maps and then they would just hand it to you. And then when the description was given to me, I really didn't have the artists there to kind of collaborate with back then because they were busy doing other things on the project too. Right. So I really don't recall, not till later on in like the second or third expansions did we start to figure out which designers are doing which zones and collaborating with them. But I think towards the beginning of the original EverQuest, I think there was a lot of just like zones that were written out from the beginning. I mean, it could have been like Steve Clover, Viltros, one of those guys that kind of wrote it from the beginning. And then, they just handed me the half a page description when they were handing out zones to get done. And then pretty much, hey, can you get this done in like 2 to 4 weeks? How high was Brad at work? The original EverQuest, Brad was actually fine. it wasn't until I think he went off to Vanguard, and then he had a lot more pressure to get a game out. Because on the original EverQuest, he was actually fine. No one knew of any of us. We had no pressure to do anything great. And when the game came out, it just took off on its own. So there's no real rumors of anything crazy going on. Not till after the game was launched. Too, we got rumors of like when the game was launched, we broke the internet of like half of San Diego because the internet provider didn't have enough bandwidth for us. And pretty much when the game came out, there was just a lot of people logging in, and they pretty much took out half the internet to San Diego because the internet provider didn't provide us with enough bandwidth. So there's a lot of little things like that, and then figuring out the GM program and everything like that. And some of the GMs did some crazy things too. Like one of them, I think, was giving away some free stuff in the game, and he got caught. And then when they were removing him, he freaked out and didn't want to leave. And I guess he was like stabbing himself with his key or something. Just weird stories, things like that. So yeah, I mean, originally on the first development, there weren't too many crazy Brad stories because, like I said, he didn't have this pressure on him that he did after the release of EverQuest.
Yeah, and so I saw you responding to a question in chat, and so
yeah,
I'll let you respond to whatever you want to respond to. And at the end of the day, your answers are your answers. I saw the question in chat, and based on the previous question from this person who I've never seen before, I just figured they're coming in here to be a little bit of an asshole and get some attention.
Okay.
So I'll watch the next question.
Brad was fun to work with on that project. And then there's one here on populating. I really didn't do any populating. We had other guys that were more design savvy, go in there and populate and do the NPCs and do the loot. I think Jeff Zadkin and Ryan Palacio were some of the main guys that did that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Ryan's come up a few times. Because we had Jeezy on a week or two ago, and
Okay.
Jeff and Michelle we've had on in the last like 2 weeks. Yeah, so it's interesting. Ryan's one that has definitely come up and kind of an unsung hero based on my just knowledge from when I was there, and then all the stories afterwards. But I heard he's fairly private, and I haven't reached out. That early period, you got in how long before the game shipped?
I got in about a year and a half before. I came in summer of 97 and the game released late 99, or was it March 99? But I was in there for about a year and a half before the release. And how big was the EQ team? I think we were around like 30-ish or so. It wasn't that big of a team. I mean, yeah, 1699. So yeah, I was about there a year and a half before release. The team we had, I'd say around 10, 11 level designers, world builders. We had about 3 or 4 regular artists, and then 4 or 5 programmers, and then just production. So I'd say around like 30-ish or so. Yeah. It wasn't that big of a team. Nowadays, these teams are 100 to 200 people to make an MMO. So
the tool, the tool that you guys were using, that's come up a couple times, and I remember that from when I first got there. Dave Nevela was showing me the tool and how it was a bit different than the other things that I've been messing with, like Quake Editor or whatever. Did you basically get there and have to learn how to do that? What was that like, and what were some of the limitations? And
did we get our engine from Pyrotechnics? They picked up an engine from somewhere else that they paid for, and then John Buckley was a really top of the line 3D programmer back then, and he pretty much took that and with the other programmers, Steve Clover and Kevin McPherson, they just rewrote it. Roger Uzin was one of the main programmers too. I think he developed the level editor that we used, and it was really a rudimentary level editor, but it was kind of hard to work with, but it's what we had at the time, and it built the zones what we needed to. But pretty much you just drop vertex points, and then you pretty much would circle them and hit enter, and it would create a box room, and it would give you a height, and then you could split it. And pretty primitive in what things are able to do now, but you work with what you have. And back then 3D was still in its infancy back then, so we just made use of it, but it worked. It got us some zones.
The I don't know if I'm gonna find an example of it here, but one of the things I've been really interested in as I've come back is there are like these irregularities that you'll see in especially in sort of natural terrain. So if you're looking at like Crushbone or something like that, there are always these little steps. Maybe I would see them down in the basement. I forget, like on the way down.
Yeah. Like I said, we had vertices that we would plot down, and then you would just circle them and hit enter to create a triangle or a polygon, pretty much. And some of the artists, when they started, they would create more than 5 points, and later on, when things got more complicated, it would break things. But we would pretty much just draw little points out, and then we would have a tool to where we could raise the slope of the floor or the angle. And we didn't really have like a terrain editor. Like in Unrest right now, we couldn't use any terrain editor in there. So we pretty much just had to take the floor geo and just kind of slope it. And then when it would intersect with a different one, there would be like a little bit of a vertical edge there too. So it was pretty much just taking a floor that was cut up into different polygons and just changing the slope of it to get an angle. That was pretty much our organic type of modeling that we had.
But those like artifacts that pop up there, those little edges that pop up, they're so amazing.
Mhm.
We've gone back over the last year as we're running through the zones, and one of the things we don't have on our team really is like dedicated art. So I've basically picked up Blender and have been doing the placeholder sort of area so we can go in and play and test. And I've been recreating those edges in certain areas just because they look so damn cool. It's just like these cool little details, I guess, were an artifact of the tool.
Yeah, pretty much. Like I said, it was hard to snap things precisely, so a lot of times we just gave it like a little edge just to kind of make sure and get the texture in there. But like I said, we really didn't have any organic control to do anything organic. It was pretty much you were building out of a cardboard box is pretty much what it was doing. So
you did you have many iterations on like a zone like Unrest? Was there much back and forth, or when you wrapped it up, was it handed off? Did you say somebody else was working on textures, like Rick or somebody, or?
Yeah, Rick Schmidt. But we worked together. He pretty much would give me the textures as I was working on it, and then before it was done, he pretty much was done. And he did some of the bookcases, the fake bookcase wall. He did that texture for the door. But once he was done with that, he would go and help with other zones. And once the zone was done, then we pretty much would just hand it off to a designer. And then the designers would sit there and populate it and put the NPCs. They would tune it, do a game, do their play test in there, and get some beta testers in there, get some loot in there, and just tune it for a while.
So you were on through Kunark. Where did you move?
Actually, I was through Planes, and I think Plane of Knowledge is one of the last one when they started to do all like the planes, and I think a lot of people started to get more turned off from the game because travel became a lot easier.
Yeah.
With some of these planes and stuff. I did build the city of Charval in Lucklin, and then I built some of the other cities, and then I did Kunark, I did Chardok, Kylong Plains, and then Sebilis, and I think Karasis on some of those, and then Velius. I did like Kale, Drakel. I think I did one other zone in Velius. I don't remember. Jeez. But yeah.
Yeah,
So every
it's an all-star
technology
list.
did not allow us to do seamless zones. They talked about seamless zones in EQ2, but technology did not allow it, and I think people wanted to be able to customize more zones too.
Yeah. So the list that was just posted from it. All right. So Unrest, Kale, Chardok, Charasis. Yeah. Memorable
I did
zones.
Rivervale. Yeah, and I did some cities. I did Felwith. I did Caledine. I did do Grob. Which one was the troll? Grob was Ogre. The troll one. What was the troll city again? I forget.
Agak?
It was Grob. Agak was
It
the
was,
troll
yeah,
one.
switch them.
Yeah, Agak. Okay. Turnip, you know them all, don't you? Turnip Jin.
Yes.
Long-time player.
Turnip is very knowledgeable. Yeah, it's funny. Kaladin is another one I was thinking of when I was thinking of like the natural sort of the way the hallways break up in the terrain in there.
Yeah. And then trying to get the cave feeling in it with the ceilings, and same thing as just taking polygons and sloping them, and trying to create something interesting.
When you were looking at the proportions for Rivervale and for Caladim, it seems like you just went along with it. You're like, okay. Did you have an actual character model to look at the height for the halfling and the dwarves, or?
No, actually, that was one thing that was really planned out well. Was they did think about the door sizes with the players, and the scale references is probably, I think, was done really well in EQ, and I think in other games it has. I mean, I think EQ1 still does it better than a lot of the games, to where you actually really feel small, and you really feel big when some of the games. But they did have door sizes for each races. Like the halflings had like a certain, I think it was like 8 feet by 8, same as the dwarves, and then like the trolls were like 14 by 14, humans were like 10 by 10. So we had door sizes for each race. So we would build things along to their dimensions, and like I said, that kind of actually made it EQ feel pretty nicely with like the size disparages and everything like that.
Yeah. So you're saying you weren't like a super D&D nerd before you got there, but then one of the things I'm noticing is as I'm trying to build zones, I'm like, I need a lot of reference art. Did stuff just jump out of your imagination when you're looking at these different zones, or did you have a lot of ref?
I had reference. Luckily, my sister's boyfriend played a lot of D&D. So when he heard that I was on the project, he was all excited, and he let me use his D&D books. So I pretty much would just scour through the D&D books, trying to learn about the races. And when I had to do like the dwarf city, I had to figure out, okay, what are these dwarves? How are they? They're meticulous, real detailed, but they were a stout dwarf, and just trying to figure out like how their temperaments were, how intricate and detailed they were too. And then you get to the trolls and stuff. Everything's just kind of clunky and put together. No real like thought. So you just try to figure out the personalities behind each race and try to really play towards those elements and those details of their personality to try to create something that is kind of unique to their race.
Oh, Zarn's here.
Yeah, I did do City and Mist. Yes, I love that. That was one of I totally forgot about that one. That was one of my favorite ones too. Oh yeah, damn. Thanks for bringing that one back up. I did do Pluto Caverns.
So for
knowledge.
anybody that's just listening or listening to the VOD later, or if this
You
is,
do, yeah,
on
so yeah.
Spotify, the list is Terrassus Chardok, the City of Mist, Felwith, North and South, Fungus Grove, Grob, Kale, Caladem, North and South, Pluto Caverns, Plane of Knowledge, Plane of Torment, Plane of
I
Water,
did do Temple of Ishan.
Rivervale, Sebilis, Charval, Full Row Tower, Temple of Ishan, and Unrest.
Temple of Ishan with all the dragons and stuff, yeah. I remember that, doing all the dragon carvings.
Needless to say, you've kind of worked on the hits.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I do have my EQ MMO, or what is it, the GDC MMO Hall of Fame plaque somewhere still. So
Oh, nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was like
So,
the second.
dude, going back, like looking at that list, first of all, it's hard for me to believe that you weren't a giant, like a giant D&D fantasy nerd going into it.
I mean, I did love fantasy. Fantasy is probably was my favorite genre growing up. And then when I had to do sci-fi stuff, it was kind of the same thing to where I had to go and get the reference. I had to build that reference bank in your head, um, and it takes time. You think things like this could just, you could research it, but yeah, you have to actually go in there and you have to do your research and build that, reference bank in your head to be able to draw information from. But yeah, growing up, I did enjoy a lot of fantasy stuff. So that was probably my favorite genre growing up.
um, so when you say it takes time as well, that leads to another question. How long would you have for a zone? How long would you spend on some of these zones, and did it vary?
Well, I mean, on the original EverQuest, we had 2 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, really, to do a zone towards the end when I think we really hit full production with like 6 months left in the project. And they're like, okay, we need to get done, I think. And then Brad would come up to me and go, okay, you have a month to to do this. And then Rosie, who was my lead, would call me in and go, can you get this done in 2 weeks? So yeah, so it was pretty much 2 to 4 weeks in the beginning, and then later on, as we did more of the expansions that were a little bit more time consuming, some of the bigger ones. I know like Charval probably took me like 6 months, 6 to 9 months, just because it was a city. The cities always take a lot more time just because there's so much more involved in the cities. You have the trade centers, the shops, the banks. You have to include all the stuff that the city needs. So um, anytime someone did the city, it's probably about 2 to 3 times as long to take to do a city as an adventure zone.
The you just said it, it, or at least it sounded like you said you guys really went into full production about 6 months before release.
Yeah, but that's like with most projects. You're doing R&D and trying to figure things out. 50 to like 70% of the time, and then once you guys get that done, and then you pretty much go into full ramp production once you've ironed out all the tools in the pipeline and the design. And a lot of projects that is usually like the last year before production is when you really have a good idea of what needs to be done, and you have the pipelines down and you know what to do, the tools are done. So usually the last 30% of the development cycle is just pretty much full production.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's I tell people I worked on DC Universe Online from the very beginning. There was like when we were a 5-person team till launch. It took 5 years, and I swear we did
Yeah,
the bulk of the content creation in the last year, maybe year and a half.
yeah. Like I said, that's a majority, I think, of a lot of projects that are new and not sequeled.
Yeah.
So
I mean, so one of the questions that came up just now from Coyote, at what point during pre-release development did you guys on the team realize you might be up to something really special and lasting with EQ?
I think it was just the beta tests. We were getting a lot of people wanting to join in the beta test. I know they had Tannerus. I don't know if you guys remember Tannerus. That was kind of the game that was kind of the precursor for tech-wise. They were developing the tech to do, you know, multiplayer online, and that game was really fun. So a lot of people from there kind of branched over and really started to like EverQuest, and I think it was during the beta times that we saw a lot of people wanting to get beta testing and enjoying it, and people playing spending a lot of hours on there in beta tests. So it was during that time I think we were onto something. We might have something special.
Yeah, the
the zone feature that I'm not gonna lie, I kited a lot. So I was a druid and I liked being in the outdoor zones and kiting things for a little bit. So and then I did enjoy once I started to understand gameplay and characters and classes, I did enjoy like having pets and being a spellcaster, and I liked my necro. I liked, getting my little skeleton guy up there. And what was fun too is when you see an NPC with a weapon and you go, oh, he has a weapon, let's go kill him and take his weapon, and you throw it on your own pet and things like that. So that was always kind of fun too. So just think, just more the gameplay. Once I started to understand the gameplay and like it, those were things that I enjoyed, but I knew I didn't really have any, input in it, or I didn't contribute to it, but those were fun.
one of the questions I've been meaning to ask before I forget. So how much experience did you have before getting on the EQ team with regards to creating environments?
Zero.
Zero.
I was pretty much plucked out of college. Um, we started off with, like I said, I was kind of lucky. I got into 3D as 3D was in its infancy, and I was able to kind of get in there from the beginning and learn. But then it kind of exponentially started to get more complicated and detailed, and I kind of fell behind. But then I've been getting back into that and getting more into the high poly modeling and more of the up to date content and tools right now. So right now I'm pretty much I'm building models right now, and I'm actually on film right now. But back then I had no experience, and I was just kind of in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. So you weren't modding, or like, because did you say Sabrina or somebody got you on a team? And
She was modeling like a figure model for the artist at Sony. So she befriended Rosie, who was the art lead back then, and then she pretty much was I submitted the resume to her, and she submitted it to Rosie, and and she ended up being on the project too, and she built some of the classic zones too. She built Black Burrow, which is another one of the iconic beginning zones. Did some other really good work. She was like the main lighter, during the first 3 expansions, and all the good lighting. Pretty much, she did all the good lighting.
yeah, it's just crazy to me because I know it was early in the industry and absolutely early for MMOs, but it's interesting the number of people that just kind of came out of different places and then contributed in that EQ as a foundation. So she was modeling and then came in and then created Black Burrow, which is super iconic.
Yeah.
Okay. That's so awesome.
Interesting people's backgrounds and all that stuff too.
Yeah. And so Turnip just asked another question about TOV and whether or not you're aware. So we're on Project 1999 right now. It's not an actual official EverQuest server. So I wasn't sure if are you aware of it? Have you checked it out?
I am aware of it. Yeah. I did work on Pantheon for a little bit, and yeah, they were always kind of referring back to the P99 server just to go back for the nostalgia and go back and play the game originally from the beginning. And I guess what was it, the progression server too, where a lot of people really like that. It just things would gradually open up again when people would defeat certain areas. So, but yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the game. I mean, there's all these other MMOs, but there's still a lot of people that enjoy the original design and gameplay of P99. So it's kind of it's pretty neat to see that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it just feels like it feels like different games. I mean, when I was on the team, I was during that era. You mentioned Plane of Knowledge, and then the sort of rift in the player base as we started introducing different mechanics for things that we thought were solving problems at the time. And then it's kind of led to a branch of more common mechanics in MMOs today. But it feels like there's this old school kind of classic feeling EQ style of game that you see on like P99 that hasn't been explored as much. I think that's why so many of us just come back to it.
Yeah, I figured people just don't have the time to spend much time into a game like this anymore.
Yeah. So, can I ask? I've heard from mostly designers and then we had like Jeff Butler on and then Michelle, and so we get different perspectives of the way things were working back around launch. It sounded pretty hectic and pretty crazy. Some of the meetings sounded like they were pretty. There was a lot of stuff that had to be worked through and different. I, I'll just say some of the meetings I was in were contentious, so I have to imagine even back then. As an artist, what was the experience like? Did you see a lot of that? Were you involved in a lot of the sort of shit that was popping up here and there, or did you kind of go head down and make stuff?
I mean, we didn't really have to make decisions on. Our job was just to make things look good and be creative, and we weren't really designing out zones, so we didn't really argue a lot of times on what needed to be built or anything like that. We collaborated and tried to help each other out as artists. I know design is different because everybody has their own, not everybody, people have their own ideas of how things are meant to be played or how they want to play them. So I could see that people would be a little bit more contentious in some of those meetings. But yeah, I heard, Jeff did like to yell at people, and but in the art part of it, it wasn't too bad. Jeff didn't yell at me too often, but I know that was how he kind of dealt with designers quite a bit. I know in the design department there was a lot more yelling going on than it was in the art department. So yeah, I heard of those stories that were going on, but I pretty much we were a little bit more shielded from the art. It's just pretty much just give us design and then send a designer over and then or collaborate with him. But yeah, I know I heard those stories too. We didn't deal with it that much because we left that to you guys.
Yeah. It's for what I might be wrong, but I swear when I'm thinking about us working together on like Planes of Power, and it wasn't as much for Luckland because I was just super newbie designer, so I just kind of got handed stuff and it was like, here, you work on this. And so it was like Charval and things like that. But with Planes, I remember, I swear, some of the interactions, it was just kind of like,
can you do this? No, I can't.
Yeah, can you do this? No. And you're like, tell me what you want. And it's like, what about this and this? That's not going to happen, but we can do this and this. Good. Okay, now leave me alone. I'm busy.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, back then I think I wasn't the easiest. I was really young and I was kind of a punk.
The same here.
Being
absolutely.
and then being on the original team and having some success, I probably wasn't the easiest person work with when I was younger. You live and you learn. I, am much more, workable and easier to get along with than I was in the past. But you get, a little bit of an ego when you're young and you're
Dude,
like, no, I don't want to do it the way you do it.
I
Don't tell me how to
understand.
do
I
my
was the
job.
biggest asshole. I look back to my period on EQ. I was like, I've told people here that a lot because they're like, "Oh, you seem, relatively chill and normal." Like I was the opposite of chill. It was just, yeah, I got a big head quick. But yeah,
Yeah.
speaking of which, I mean, how did that feel though? The game comes out. You're working on multiple expansions, so it's you had to have been doing
Yeah.
well.
You're getting royalty checks. And so, yeah, you kind of feel like you're on the top of the world for a little bit. And then I remember one time, Brian Fisher, if you remember him, Brad picked him out and made him like the, associate producer. And I remember one time he came in. I saw him recently at McQuaid's kind of memorial service, and he came up to me and he's like, "Oh, Vu, I remember the first interactions we had." And I'm just like, "Oh, really?" He's like, "I came in and I told you that the doors on Temple Vision in one of the zones were too small," and he pretty much just said, "You just said pretty much just fuck off. The ship has already sailed." And I'm just like, "Wow." Did I really say that? Was I really that bad? I'm just like,
I can imagine. I
yeah, I
can
mean,
actually imagine. I'm not saying that to be mean at all. I look back on it, I think it was great.
yeah, I mean, but back then you think about it, it's like, when we were exporting some of these zones, some of these maps, I mean, took like 2 weeks. I mean, I figured out some of the technology to where we would split them on building them with the level editor, and we would get them to publish export in like 3 days. But some of these cities took months to export, and we had to pretty much base our launch time off the export times of these maps, because and if the power went out, then we had to restart this export, and the ship date would be pushed back because of these exporting on these maps. So yeah, of course, it's going to take 2 months to build this, to export out a map, and this guy comes in at the very last minute and goes, "Hey, can you change all the door sizes?" It's just like, fuck you, dude. No, go away, dude. So yeah, so that's kind of, it's just how it was back then.
Did you
So
guys have like I thought I heard or remembered, was it like one export machine or a couple of export machines?
we had a we eventually got farms to, I think we had like three. We would just go in there, and whichever one was free, we'd start a publish on. And yeah, people that had cities, some of the bigger ones, they would take a lot longer, and they would kind of, hog a machine, and it would take months and stuff like that. And we would always kind of see, because it was like a viz calc. It would show you what number of polygons, and it's like calculating its visibility, to all the other polygons, and we just kind of go on, and you're like, okay, this is going to take a while. So yeah.
The there's an earlier question that we missed that was were there set budgets that you were considering at the time? Whether it be like memory or poly count or anything?
Uh, Texture budget was big. It was actually pretty funny because, like, you think about it now, the environment textures, I think, were like 64 by 64. And if you had any text or something that needed to be read, you could go 128 or 128. So, and then like I had it actually helped out with some of the character textures. I think in Velius, I made some of the armor textures for the elves and the dwarves, and we were using like the old models from the original ones. And those were really low polys, and you'd have one like a belt across like a UV texture seam wouldn't be just straight across the belt, it would be here, and then the next poly seam it would be like way moved down, just because of how the low poly and the everything just
Mhm.
got shifted. So um I think the characters were like 256 text, the resolution was 256 back then. So yeah, so it was mainly texture budgeting. 64 by 64 is what pretty much we all had to use, but if you had some text and you got lucky, you got 128. So it's pretty funny.
One other question, because I forget, were you on EQ too? Because there was a question
Yeah,
about,
I was.
yeah, I thought so. How did you feel about some of the zones? Did you even work on some of the zones that you had done before?
Yeah, I didn't, they didn't give me like the legacy zones that I did there. So I worked on that. I don't remember what I worked on the original EQ2 zones. I know I did like some stuff for the other ones. I did like Steamfont Mountains and some of the other stuff on EQ2, but no one ever remembers them, so I don't remember them. it doesn't have that good of an impact on people, so I never really have to recall what I built back with on that project because the original one just had so much more impact on people that yeah, geez, I don't even think about EQ2 that much anymore.
Did you feel a difference when you're on that project?
I did. I mean, that's when you get the money, and that's when you have expectations. They brought in Brian Hook, who was supposed to be the hotshot programmer back then. And then he would fight with Brad because both of those guys had egos. So EQ2 was way different, and then they just brought in new people, and the design got changed around. I think John Blakely was the producer there, so it was just a whole new project, whole new team, new leadership, and they just wanted to take it a different direction because the game was coexisting together.
Mm.
So, but like I said, it didn't have the lasting impact that EQ1 had with people. So I'm never really asked about what zones that I work in there. So they've just kind of disappeared in the back of my brain somewhere.
When you were working on it, though, I mean, did you work on it through launch first of all?
Yeah.
Okay.
I worked on it in the beginning, and then through launch, and then a couple of expansions, and then from there I went on to DC for a little bit, for about a year, to help out, and then I jumped on the PlanetSide to work on that, and that's when I started getting into sci-fi. And then after that, the company just started to go downhill, and it ended up just no longer existing.
The EQ2 sort of experience, you given that you worked on EQ, you played some, I mean, you had insight into what that was like. As an artist, though, was there a general feel of on the art team of trying to, I don't know what, to me it felt like the art team was really trying to just make the art as high fidelity and artsy, and like the art felt like was
Just
very pushed, but not
heck,
necessarily
yeah,
EQ.
yeah. I mean, you know how it is. It's just like you get a bigger budget. They're just trying to push the tech. They want things to look a little bit more high fidelity, but you're not getting like the original design and the flavor and concept of the races and all the environments that were kind of like thought out back in the days. But again, they were trying to do things a little bit different. They wanted them to coexist, so it wasn't really something that was supposed to replace it. So they had to kind of push it in a different direction.
But as an artist, when you're working on that with the higher fidelity and stuff, did that part of it feel
I
kind of
mean,
good to flex?
yeah, it's more exciting to do, but then as an artist, it's more work. The more detail that you have, there's always more work with more detail, and then it's just going to take more time. And then if they want something bigger too, it's just more time, more resources to get things to look better. And I guess like you have more people working on it, and then I guess maybe you don't have the original feel that was originally designed when you have so many people working on it in conjunction and doing different parts of it. But it just didn't have the same soul, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, we talk
It's
about
just
that a
different.
lot. Because you look at the low
Yeah.
poly stuff, and it's low poly, it's simple textures, but there's so much character. And so,
Yeah, and I do want to say a shout out to one of the guys that did design a lot of that, Rick Johnson. He was one of my favorite guys to work with when he was on the original. He was like an outstanding artist as well as a as outstanding person. And sadly, he you know passed away to cancer during right before EQ2, just around the beginning of that project. And yeah, I always like to go in his office, and he was just amazing. He just quiet, but he and it's funny too because he did everything by hand, and then he got into Photoshop, and no, I have an undo now. So he was able to do that. But then like I went in there and I started to show him like some more stuff with Photoshop, with like layers and little stuff like that, and he was just kind of blown away. He's just, what? I could put things on layers and have more control on this, and yeah. So it was just crazy watching him because he did everything, like you did, like a traditional artist. He would draw
mm,
like all the scales, like do everything, he would, but then he got to the point to where he'd draw like 5 scales and he would copy and move them around on the dragon and stuff like that. So you got to, he started to use more of the tech, but back in the days when you'd go and you watch him, he just did everything like traditionally, like, he would just paint stuff on like the models just traditionally and did everything really, really well. And that's probably why, the characters and stuff kind of hold so well together because he was such an amazing artist. And when he passed away, it was just like, it was sad. It was one of those days to where it's just like, I usually don't get too sad when I see someone passing away, but I did see him maybe like a week before he passed, and he was in the hospital, and he had machines hit to him. And
mm.
that was really kind of hard to see him, see him in that position. And when he left, it was sad. But to say, the reason that a lot of the old characters and stuff look well and hold up so well is because Rick Johnson was an amazing artist back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, man, it's tough, and I don't know, like, I'm 46 now, so when I look at it, I'm like, I guess this was happens when you hit your 40s, and I look at, folks I worked with and stuff, it's LinkedIn is weird right now because I'll see, like, updates that are like, "Congratulate so and so," and I'm like, it's a list of people I've worked with that were rad that have passed away, and it's just more and more so, like, seeing it, it's like, shit, man, especially for
Yeah,
folks whose stories haven't gotten out or maybe, people don't fully appreciate.
I mean, this industry isn't the healthiest industry, and it's been kind of sad because I have been seeing a number of my coworkers pass within like the past 5 to 10 years. And
Mm.
you know, if you guys do decide to get in this industry, do take care of your health. Make sure you guys aren't stagnant all the time, and you want to try to eat healthy foods and
Yeah.
not just always eating processed fast food because it's easy and you guys have work to do. But it's convenient now. But you don't want your coworkers to have to be always worrying about their coworkers passing away and stuff like that. So that's the one thing that's kind of tough. There has been Brad passed away a couple of years. Even Mike Hutchins, who asked about Najima, he just passed away like a year ago too. So yeah, I mean, it's getting to the point to where like you said, in LinkedIn, it's just who's here and who's not. So yeah, make sure that you guys do take care of your health if you guys do want to follow this route in the industry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's one of those things in a lot of these interviews when I think about, like, one of the people I wish I could have here, was Dave Nevela because he
Oh, I
got me
love
into
Dave.
yeah, he got me
Yeah,
into the
I
company.
love Dave. Dave was awesome. And yeah, same thing on Facebook. You see the yearly birthday thing, and you see the post and all that kind of stuff, and it's always sad. But yeah, Dave was awesome. I used to always go and hang out and chit chat with Dave too. So
'Cause we worked on DC and, EQ and then DCUO together, and yeah, it was, It's funny, man. He's such a character.
Yeah.
And the so it's funny. I thought I had a question. We'll pull some from chat in a second, but one of the things I was thinking about. Oh yeah, going back to low poly. Just sort of wrap that up. Um, Now that you've moved on in terms of skill, right? Do you think would you be able to go back and do sort of the same? Like if you were to if the request was to make a zone that was the same fidelity as Unrest right now, do you think that's something now that you've advanced your skill you could actually go back and do in the same way, or do you think it was a product of sort of where you were at the time?
I mean, it's doable once you've done it. You could always go back and do it. It's easier, when you think about doing things in the current technique and pipeline. You're like, oh, I'm gonna have to do this. I'm gonna have to build each shingle, take it in the ZBrush, do the nano mesh, make this texture. And but it's a whole process. Doing stuff and then low fidelity stuff would be pretty easy. It's just making some good textures and figuring out what's going to be in there. Maybe just like a little concept design of what you're actually looking for. And yeah, it wouldn't. I mean, it's a lot easier. I mean, right now I work in film production. I do work in virtual production, and they do need some stuff in low fidelity. So I am building the high poly model and taking things down to a low fidelity model for them to do film production in.
Yeah, and I totally wasn't asking with the plan of then also asking, do you have any spare time, and does your company let you do freelance? Those things totally not on my mind. But if you ever find that you have spare time and your company lets you do freelance and you want to do some low poly stuff, please let us know. So there was a question from Ali about how did you decide what textures you could use, and how did you produce so many?
I mean, like City of Mist, I kind of figured out the technology there, and I was able to kind of get that textured quite better than, because there's a certain way that you had to apply things, and you had to kind of figure out the way that things were done and how things were tiled. And I was able to figure that out with the vines and stuff like that on some of the stuff in City of Mist. But you, as an artist, I mean, you understand what looks good. Well, it's harder to put the things. I mean, it's easier as an artist to kind of know what doesn't look good, and you don't really have to be an artist to know what doesn't look good. But to know what looks good is gonna it takes a lot more knowledge of color theory and proportions and stuff like that. But a lot of times you just pretty much gather reference. You look at other art that people have done, and you kind of notice what works well in the color choices, and you learn through classes what colors work well together. And then you don't want to be too colorful a lot of times because it's a little distracting. So you want to use maybe 2 or 3 colors to start with, and pretty much just build upon that. But just a lot of times it's just layering. You start building the foundational elements of the zone. Then you start going down into more minor detail stuff of like what kind of design, what shape language does that zone want to have or that race has. And then sometimes there's like I try to find like a symbol or a logo or something that is unique to that race, and then you build elements around it, and you kind of put that little design element around the zone just to kind of give it that feel. But then again, shape language, angular stuff is going to be a little bit more aggressive. If you want something softer or a little more friendly, rounder, softer shapes.
Yeah, the question that just came up was the one that I was about to ask next as well. Where did you guys source your material for textures? Was a lot of stuff handcrafted or manipulated
Online, pretty much. You just go to back then those texture web pages, and then you just get base textures, and then you in Photoshop, just layer them on top. And sometimes if you have some good artists, some of the artists that we had were hand painting the textures. I know Rick for the original Unrest, he did a lot of the hand painting. illustrating for the walls and the textures on this map. So, but yeah, just finding the source materials from online and then learning how to use Photoshop properly to layer everything. Thank you, Big Green 20.
Yeah, you've mentioned the bookcase a couple times, so I figured I'd come and look at it.
Yeah, that's the right there. There it is, the secret wall. It's the only bookcase in the whole place.
Is it really? I didn't think about that.
I think so. I wanted to make it feel to where it's pretty much noticeable. I mean, are you getting chased by the ghost? No.
Nah, I'm good. I'm good. I would just die. Yeah. So earlier question as well is while we're still on EQ, is there any zone that when you think back on it, that you would, if you could redo it, would you?
I mean, I would like to, rebuild Unrest just because I think that would be fun to build with the current, knowledge that I have on now. With all the new technology, it would be kind of fun. But then again, it'd probably be it would be a big task. It would take a lot of time to do.
Was the bookcase something people found right away, or did it take time?
I mean, if you're running around and just clearing the NPCs down on the bottom floor and you go in the room, you would see a bookcase there. I don't know if people knew to click on it, but a lot of times in that game you just clicked on things. So if you accidentally clicked on it, it would open. So I don't think it was too hard. And then once one person figured out, there's all those OOC, there's all those chat channels that people would just say, hey, this is here, this is there.
Hey, I found a bookcase and I opened it and I went down in it and I died. I need someone to help me get my corpse.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So. Yeah. So you went to EQ2, worked on a couple expansions. Did you work? You said you worked on DC. We were in Austin for that. Were you working out of San Diego in support?
Yeah, I was just helping out with props, so it wasn't really anything significant. Just building, little props for scenes. And that was only for a little bit less than a year. I would say 10 or 11 months. So nothing too much. So I don't really say anything that I worked on there really influenced any people playing. Then I worked on PlanetSide 2 for a little bit.
And so from there, and it's building up as I saw the question in chat, it's kind of building up to this. You're not working on games now. You went from SOE then to another company, and so what was sort of the progression up through moving out of games?
Well, I mean, the plain truth is pretty much I was getting old and expensive, and the gaming industry is not unionized, and there's not that much protection that you're gonna get. So it's still a young industry, so that's kind of what happened. It was also probably my fault too for not keeping up with the tools the way I do now. Back then, I didn't go to art school, so I didn't really have some of these lessons kind of preached to me going through school.
Yeah.
So I kind of had to learn the hard way after Sony laid me off. It took me about a year to find another job because I was behind on the tools, and I knew I had to go back to school and learn some of the tools. And it took me about a year to get back into the industry. And then I got laid off about 3 times in 4 years. So that was just like, okay, you go through periods in your life to where you think, did I make the right career decisions in my life? Should have, been an accountant or, been an engineer, something more stable to where, I wouldn't be, the gaming industry is quite volatile. So, but then, again, I got lucky somehow. There was creative head sent out a little listing, email listing, and there was I started to look for jobs up in LA because my wife pretty much started flying and she got stationed up in LA. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll just start looking for jobs up in LA. And there's this one listing called, they were just looking for a 3D modeler, and it was, from Confidential Studios. And me being kind of dumb and lame, thought the name of the studio was Confidential Studios. And yeah, I submitted my resume to them, and they called me back about 3 days later, and they just said, "Hey, we got your resume. We can't really talk over the phone right now, but if you want to, come down to Manhattan Beach and sign an NDA, we'll, tell you what we're working on." And I'm just like, "Yeah, well, I have a haircut appointment tomorrow. If you don't mind me coming in with messy hair, then yeah, I'll cancel the appointment and come in." And I went in there, and they pretty much just, I signed the NDA, and they pretty much said, "Well, we saw your resume. We think we could use you. We're working on the Avatar sequels, and yeah, we think we could use you." And I was just like, okay. And then one of the questions was, "How are you with being yelled at?" And I was just like, "Well, I'm married right now. My wife yells at me all the time, so I think I think I'm okay with it." So they laughed and they chuckled, and and it wasn't that long of an interview. The game interviews. Sometimes you get like 3 interviews. They're freaking, you have a lunch. You got to meet all your designers to see if they like your designs, and you got to take an art test and all this kind of stuff. But they pretty much gave me an interview for about an hour, no art test, and they, decided to take me on, but it took them about 2 months to finally get me on there on board. And I was kind of like not really sure if they wanted me to be on there or not, but yeah, I got on that project, and I've been on there for 4 years now, and yeah, it's good.
Have
I'm
you
the
been yelled
lead
at?
of the. What's that?
Have you been yelled at?
You know what? I have not from the director, because I pretty much made it to the point to where he's not gonna know my name. What I'm gonna do. He's not gonna know my name, because if he knows my name, then he's yelling at me for some reason. So I got to the point to where all the work that I sent was good. He didn't yell at me, and I found out that he used to have kickboxing classes at 5:45 in the morning, and I would go in the studio, and there would be like the performers, the stunt people, and some of the actors, and we're training with the instructor that is paid for by the director. And I worked out with him. I just kind of snuck in there because I trained martial arts for a long time. I have like 16 years of martial arts training, so I trained with him. And as filming started to, and then the teacher said, "Hey, yeah, that James is coming in a little bit later. The director, he's gonna come in and work out with us." And then so I'm just, "Oh wow, okay." And I ended up working out with him, and he saw that I had training, and he's just, "Hey, what's your name?" I'm like, I'm Vu." He's like, "Vu, Vu, Vu." So we try to remember it and all this kind of stuff. So he does know my name, and it's not for my work. It's more martial arts, working out with them. And it got to a point to towards the end of our capturing and stuff like that, all the actors were done, and the stunt people were done, to where the last last class was just the director and I and the teacher. So it's just kind of weird. I had a whole hour with James Cameron, and we pretty much just sparred, and I worked out with him, and went over like some sword forms with him. And when the class was over, he's a busy guy. Everybody wants his attention. They need him to sign off on something, make decisions and stuff like that. And I'm asking him, "Hey, what's the pattern to this, form and all this kind of stuff?" And he would just stop, take his time, and just go over this whole pattern with me. And I'm just like, I feel guilty right now, because all these people really need your attention and want your attention. I'm sitting here asking you, about a sword, kata and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, that was pretty neat. That's one of the things that I'll probably remember for a while. But so yeah, so he knew my name, but it's not from yelling at me. So that was good.
Fantastic. That's good. Yeah, it's that's a great story. I mean,
Yeah.
um, I was gonna go back into some other stuff, but yeah, I'll absorb that story for a second. So yeah, the thing I was gonna ask before that was, I think people that haven't been in the industry, one of the things that I've seen, but since I'm not an artist, I don't know for sure. I figure I'd see if you can confirm it. When you're talking about the when you got laid off and you're looking for other work and just sort of realizing skill set, especially if you didn't have formal training on certain stuff, the skills needed then was something that you'd have to invest in to basically ramp up to. One of the things that I noticed was artists especially, it seemed like you had all of the work that you needed to do, and if you weren't using, like when ZBrush came out, or when it seemed like the industry, I thought folks were using Maxon and more Maya, right? And it's like, and it seems like as new tech is coming online, the artists were often having to, if their project wasn't using it, spend additional time outside of work to ramp up their
Learning.
skills. Yeah, I mean, so is that because some of the people watching, do have an interest in the
Well,
industry?
well, tell you right now, luckily we are pretty much employed by Disney, and I am actually, they have a ETP, um, employee training program, and they pretty much are allowing us one class a term at Nomans, which they are paying for. And I'm pretty much, I've been taking the classes. So with all this work, I am actually still, taking courses and trying to keep up. I'm actually learning how to rig right now. Um, so yes, it is something that you need to do. And if you want to be an artist, then it's something that's imperative. You have to, you want to keep up with the technology. You have to keep up with the latest tools, because if you don't, then it's going to be hard for you to find jobs in the future. And, my little speech about, being a little shit too and a punk, um, that did bite me in the butt too. I know that some of the people that I reached out to probably have have some recollection of me being, a little punk, and probably didn't want to exactly work with me. So, it was something that I did try to make amends with and try to be, more professional, more easy to
Yeah,
going, and, trying to be a lot. And I think that actually has helped me being promoted, because I was, I am a lead now. And I think having good people skills, having, being able to communicate with people the ideas and not yelling people and throwing them under the bus, and, just trying to be, someone that's really easy to work with. I think that is where you actually start to, get promoted, and actually be able to move up, when you actually learn how to learn people skills and learn how to work well with people.
yeah. The Do you feel like that part of you grew more once you got out of the industry, or?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when I was looking for jobs and stuff like that, I could tell that some of those behaviors in the past probably bit me in the butt. And then I kind of see it in some of the younger people that I deal with, that they're a little bit, there is some ego here and there.
Yeah,
And then, they are a little bit more selective on who they want to interact with. And, you just want to try to be, just you just want to be able to work with everybody and try not to have an attitude, and, try to not have an ego. So that's the main thing, is just, letting go of the ego and just trying to, be an easy person to work with everybody.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I've experienced that exact thing firsthand. Where it was one of those ones where I know my behavior back then, and I know the people, and then there every once in a while there's that, like, oh shit, but it's the company's in town. I'll reach out, even though I think I remember with great detail burning that bridge and scattering the ashes, but screw it, I'll try. And then it's like, yeah, no, well, we don't think you're right for the. And I'm like, all right, cool, I get it, And it's such a shit feeling, because it's like, man. But the cool thing is when you can look back on some of those opportunities and go, man, if I had gotten that job, I would have just spent the last 6 years working on nonsense. So cool thing they didn't want me. Um, I don't know if you ran into any of that. The One of the questions I have is, you were on EQ2. You didn't go to Sigil though, right? or did
I
you?
didn't. I think some people were asking about me over there, but then I wasn't really. Some of the experience I had on EQ1, some of the people, it probably could have been my attitude too. I didn't have like the best working relationships with them, so I didn't really want to work over there really.
Hmm.
So I had some issues with Brad too. I felt like I probably deserved a little bit more cash here and there from him in the past, and maybe I didn't get that. So I'm just like, well, I don't want to work with you guys if you guys aren't going to take care of me. And little things in the past that when you think about it, it's just like you don't want to really you know dwell on those things too much. But I guess I did have the opportunity, but at that point in time, I didn't really want to work on the project, and I kind of knew that they weren't going to have things that organized, and it was going to be kind of just like a constant crunch too. So that was like I think another reason.
And but you did go over, unless I'm mistaken, but you did go over to Pantheon. I mean, modules
I
in
did,
here.
and that was after I was laid off, and I was trying to find work, and I some of the other jobs that I had art test do didn't pan out well, and I ended up working on Pantheon for a little bit until the whole money thing happened there too, to when they had some crowdsourcing money, and then Brad decided to take a big chunk, and then said there was no more money to pay us. So a lot of us that have been in the industry for a while, it's just like, well, we have we needed bills to pay. So, and then once I was able to get a job, then yeah, I kind of just moved on from that because I knew that they weren't going to pay me that much, and they just didn't have the capital that they wanted to. So I kind of went there for a little bit, and I helped out for them with a little bit. But then again, I needed to. I had bills to pay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's tough on like the startups and new projects, especially if if the funding is not such that there's kind of a clear understanding of the available funds, the runway, the budget, how that's going to factor out, and everybody kind of understands. All right, we've got 3 months or we've got 6 months, and this is the plan for next steps funding and all of that. So it's tough when you've got bills. Uh, it's hard to just sort of sit there and I guess hope. A complete non sequitur, but Nick would be bummed if I don't ask the question. He asked it about 30 minutes ago. What did you work on PlanetSide 2?
I pretty much just helped with the environments. I mean, they had a level editor, terrain editor, and I did some of the terrain, and then I helped build some of the structures. We had one of the younger guys come in that was pretty experienced with some of the new pipeline stuff. So and it was Alex Draycott, and he was doing a lot of the environment stuff to the buildings and stuff like that. And I was working with him on the structures for the bases and the buildings, and then I did some stuff with the train. So pretty much world building type of stuff with some modeling of the buildings. But it wasn't like where you got your own section to kind of just handcraft on your own. So a lot of the areas were kind of like just put together by a bunch of other people already. So
Hmm.
um, it wasn't really much of me going in there and being able to kind of handcraft things at all. So some of the other projects in the future, they were a little bit less hands-on and a little less just didn't have as much input on the
Right.
designs after EQ2.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting going from a point, you know, you helped
We
out on
have complete
DC.
control. Yeah.
Yeah, and you work on that, but then reflecting back, like I can't get over that list of zones that you worked on. That is it's just a beast of a list. There was another question in chat that was asked earlier that was along the lines of how you established like a feel for, or if you had an understanding of how many players a zone would support. Was that something that evolved as you worked through launch and the various expansions, or was it always just kind of you had to create a vision for the zone and you'd go with it, and then the players actually adapted to the zone more than you adapting the zones to the players?
Yeah, I think the players were more adapting. I think, like I said, it was just pretty much an idea that was thought out, presented on paper with some concept art, and then me kind of just thinking it out and just trying to visually, aesthetically, how do I make this look cool? And then, playability, how do I make this kind of fun and interesting and provide some surprises and
Did you
whatnot.
did you sketch out? Did you use like graph paper? Did you sketch out like physically any of the areas before you built them, or did you just do it all in
I,
Iter?
kind of. I did some graph paper. I did think I mean, the level editor is kind of like a graph paper. It's pretty much just squares on top of each other.
Mm.
So, I mean, you would draw something out and then I would just kind of plot out, try to plot out the rooms and try to fit everything inside certain areas. But a lot of times they just gave us a map and we just kind of build something and pretty much just look online to see what was kind of cool and something that was good inspiration for that type of zone. And then if you find something that was good and it would kind of fit, you kind of just would start pushing that element a little bit more. And yeah, and if it just worked, and then you would just kind of go with it and start to put it in other areas. And that way you kind of have a feel, the same continental, you have the same design elements throughout the zone to where when you go in there, you kind of know that you're in a certain zone. Instead of just, filling out with a bunch of different stuff from all over the place. So it's all about getting the design elements and just kind of pushing it and creating that feel and just proportions and the color. But yeah, a lot of people try to do too much sometimes when they put things together. They're trying to take things from all over the place and put it in there. But if you just get like a few elements and just kind of work with that and kind of push that feel, then you're going to get a lot more of a unique zone and something that feels more continuous, and it's going to feel like you're in that area. And then when you leave it, you're going to kind of know that you're out of that area because a lot of those design elements are gone.
Yeah. Did was there a lot of feedback from like Rosie and I'm trying to think, what was it, Scott or who, basically art directors afterwards, but was there a lot of feedback as you were going that was kind of like helping you understand? No.
Not really. I mean, Rosie was the main lead on that, but she never really. I mean, she gave a little bit input, but nobody ever said, "Hey, just use this color," or do this or do that differently. We pretty much just got free reign of what we were able to do. And they provided us with textures and kind of like the color feel and everything like that, but it was pretty much just kind of free reign.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a small team. We didn't have like departments to be able to flesh out things and provide us with like art, like a principal artist to provide us with the concepts and the colors and the materials to be used. So yeah, it just we had limited resources and we just used what we had.
So do you think that added to the uniqueness, and you see the question in chat,
Most
like the
definitely,
character?
most definitely. Uh, because nowadays everything is, you have a big team and you're just part of a zone, and you're not really getting to kind of handcraft things anymore. And then, but again, that takes a lot of time too. So
Yeah.
that's one thing about the big projects. They lose some of their character, some of the little charm when so many people are working on it too. So do I
And
feel that one?
the question about the QA time, that's actually a really interesting question. When you've got that long to bake stuff out every time you make a change. Oof. How do you QA that?
I mean, we pretty much, we kind of knew how to get the main bugs out there. It was just pretty much building the collision boundaries to where people just couldn't bounce out of the zone was the main QA, and then falling through the world. But the tool was tight enough to where it didn't really make, when you did raise a floor or anything like that, it would just create the the polygons to fill in the missing areas. So there wasn't that much QA to do on some of the zones. It was mainly for like floating things that weren't touching the ground, or things like that. But yeah, I guess we would see that stuff before the final export, and then the final export we just had to make sure that everything was working well. And one of the main fixes that we had for things was pretty much, well, just put a rock on it if you can't fix it. So that was the main way to fix things. Well, shit.
Hide it behind a giant tree, just like whatever you can fluff in.
Yeah, just put a rock in it. If it looks bad, cover it with a rock. That was that's how we kind of fixed a lot of things.
Oh man. Oh, it's funny. I think people think you're joking too, but I know you're not. I really do know you're not.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't have that much policing back then, so we got away with a lot of things. So yeah. So put a rock on it was pretty popular. It was just, how do you fix this? Put a rock on it. No one's gonna get to it.
Yeah.
And
Slap a rock on it is still going, an EQ or ongoing EQ art tradition. Zarn's on the team right now, right? So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So speaking of, any memory stories about lighting and color decisions when creating the zones? Example was the use of fantastic coloring and intentional.
Well, I mean, like I said, in the first few, original and stuff like that, Sabrina Fox was our main lighter, and she was she had a really good eye for color and lighting. So once her work started to shine, and we pretty much just had her light pretty much as much zones as we can, because she was just really good at it. So and lighting was pretty much her specialty.
Yeah. Can you think of, so there have been a lot of questions about some of the just random stuff that's in zones where people are like, well, what was that supposed to go to, or where's that supposed to go?
I did a lot of random stuff. I put a lot of like dead dogs. Well, I think that was EQ2. I put a lot of like dead creatures, dead dogs and dead horses on things. Just and then I even got to the point to where I was putting just like skeletons in just random places too. And I think Tim Hadelar in EQ2, he was the lead environment lead. He tasked out one of the other artists. Their task was pretty much to go into my zones and take out anything that was ridiculously just
offensive. Ridiculous, offensive. Like half a
like, don't dwarf. You could do it, but they let me do it, but they just had someone else go in there and just clean up my work. Just,
oh man,
so many people.
Yeah, dude. So we've hit I think roughly a 2-hour mark of stuff here. I'm trying to think, is there anything that I've forgotten to ask you? I've been trying to grab questions out of chat as we've gone, but was there anything? What did I forget? So, yeah, I think chat guys, do you have anything else? Otherwise, yeah, were there any memorable events or anything that happened from that early era? Everybody loves any story from sort of that launch era that we didn't cover or didn't get to that you remember?
I mean, geez, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of weird stories on parties and stuff like that. When someone got drunk on the table, danced, and next party we weren't allowed to dance on tables. So it's just like weird little stuff like that. But I don't have any tattoos.
Don't didn't get any tattoos
Brandon,
for you
one of the
there.
other artists and I talked about, he did a design for, I think, the Ixar, and I'm just like, oh, that's a pretty cool design. I know someone's gonna probably get that tattooed to them. So yeah, I don't have any like design elements from the game tattooed to me. I don't have any tattoos in general.
It's a good move. I would avoid it.
Yeah, sleeper. About the sleeper, what's the sleep? Is that a zone?
The sleeper in Velius, the end all be all in that expansion.
I don't know. I don't recall.
The other question with regards to banners in the hallway at the entrance of TOV, a design or art choice?
Probably design or art. I mean, I like to use banners just to cover walls. The hot dog sandwich. It's a hot dog sandwich. But yeah, I mean, I used banners and flags a lot just for wall space. They're big and they're not too expensive. So you know, a lot of times in zones, I would just use banners and flags.
Cool, man. So I think the one last question that I have that I forgot to ask earlier was when you reflect back on your career, you know, based on the stuff that you're doing now, do you see the work that you did in games, especially starting where you did it, etc. Do you see where you're at now as kind of an evolution or kind of culmination of that experience, or did you find that when you left games, um, you really kind of went another route and those things have stayed sort of separate?
No, I think it's a culmination. I mean, I'm kind of doing, you know, what I started doing. I mean, I originally at the beginning I wanted to do characters and stuff like that and creatures, and I'm actually circling around a little bit to where I'm starting to do a little bit of a character work right now in the project. I'm not designing them, but I am, you know, doing some of the wardrobe and you know learning the rig stuff.
Mm.
But it's a culmination. They do lay out scenes and layout for the scenes in the movie, and that's world building, kind of the same thing. I am pretty much I'm working on Pandora. It's pretty much Norath in a different dimension. So same thing. We're world building. You're building an environment, and you're trying to um, keep that environment to the same type of design and same type of elements that make it unique. And same thing. The Navi in the next coming up movies, you're gonna get see a lot more of Pandora, and it's kind of the same thing of Norath. You're gonna see like different races or different types of Navi out there, and different types of parts of Pandora. So it's the same thing. You're building a world. You're designing and you know facilitating art to create that feel for those environments and that type of those type of characters that you are designing. So a lot of it is pretty much a culmination in learning how to deal and manage people and doing things properly and efficiently. And yeah, it's all a culmination of from the beginning of games and schooling and continuing to try to, you know, always trying to learn, you know, just be a better person than you were the day before. And it's just a culmination. And I'm getting to the point now to where people are asking me for knowledge and guidance and experience, and it's just like, okay, that's kind of weird because you know I didn't like to, I was one of those guys that never wanted to ask people, and you know I didn't expect people to be asking me for guidance and stuff now too. So um but it comes along with you know, comes along with it if you're sitting there trying to constantly learn and trying to just you know be better at what you're doing. So it's a culmination, and like I said, if you want to follow this, it's one of the things that you're going to have to do. But in general, as a person, I think it is important to you know just try to be better each day. The better, you know, the more that you better that the more that you develop yourself as a person, the more that people are willing to, follow you.
Yeah.
So your and one, your ability to learn as a leader, is the same thing as your it will affect your ability to, draw people to follow you too. So yeah, just constantly, just try and be better.
Yeah, yeah, and I think a theme that's come up in some of these discussions, has also been, at least from my end, for folks that are just starting out, be sure to appreciate the people you're working with while you're working with them
Definitely.
instead of like 20 years later.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's been great seeing everybody and getting honestly, like in the case of talking to you, getting to actually learn more about you and talk to you more. And it's one of those things where I look back and I'm like, man, it would have been cool to talk to some of these folks more back then.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
But yeah, this is great. This is fun. It's nice to be able to, talk about this and yeah, definitely, appreciate the people that you work with, appreciate, those talents because there is definitely a lot of talent in the gaming and film industry and yeah, appreciate the people that and then also, feel you should teach people, give your knowledge freely to try to do that because it's just going to get, passed along. Um, a lot of people have taught me a lot of good stuff too. So, you know, do the same thing. Always try to help people, try to, teach the people below you.
yeah, yeah, man. So um, have a couple more questions in chat, but after that, I think we'll wrap up. I don't want to take all of your day. It's funny, the more you're talking about like Cameron and the stuff you're working on. I'm like, damn, I'm really appreciative that you've taken the time for us. Yeah. So last two questions. What game have you spent the most hours actually playing? And then a question about whether or not you helped on EQOA.
I didn't work on EQOA. I was on EQ2 at the time. That was a different direction too that they were going, but I decided to stay on original EQ. Gaming wise, if you work on games, then it affects the way you play games. I haven't played games too much lately because when I play games now, I sit there and I look at the art, and then something that kills me is attacking me, and I'm just like, leave me alone. I'm trying to look at this asset, and I just same thing with movies now. If I'm watching a movie, I'm just like, oh, yeah, how did they do that? And they're doing this way, or did they actually build that whole set? Stuff. So it's just like once you work on things, you don't see things and play games the same way. So I haven't really been playing games. I've just been working, trying to stay healthy, and keeping up with my social, trying to have like a social life.
Yeah.
I never had a chance to hang out with Keith Parkinson. He did some awesome stuff, but I know I was young, and I think back in the days, he wasn't really around the studio. He was at Sigil. I never worked at Sigil when he was there. That would have been kind of neat to work with him there. But yeah, I don't really have any experience with Keith. But I heard he was, yeah, his art was fantastic. It was, excellent art. But and I heard he was a really cool, really genuine guy too. So
Yeah. Cool, man. So I tell you what, gonna wrap up here. I want to thank you for taking the time. It's been really rad talking to you. It's funny, we were asking folks before you came on. I think I even asked you, and you mentioned a couple zones, like what who's been working on what. Your zone list, no bullshit, not just saying it because you're on here. It's a lot of hits on that zone list, a lot of zones that we spend a lot of time talking about here. So thanks a lot
yeah,
for
I'm
the
proud of
work.
that.
Yeah,
Oh
you
yeah,
should
I
be.
mean, it's definitely it's I'm proud and I'm appreciative that I've affected people like that to where they remember the zones that I work in and yeah, that type of stuff. Yeah, it's pretty neat to think about 20 years ago that people still or have memories of some of the old work work that I did. So hearing that type of stuff is really cool.
Yeah, dude.
Well,
Um,
thank you, Coding Captain.
Yeah. So I tell you what, we'll wrap it up here, and then I will cut the VOD, and it'll begin where you kicked it off, and then it'll end right around here. And
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, if you want to do this another time in the future, let me know. I'll be definitely happy to come on again.
absolutely.
I won't have. I mean, you'll probably hear the stories again, so it won't be as fun and interesting. But you know,
We'll try to think of some questions, especially as people I think go through your zone list and have specific questions. Without a doubt, maybe we can do a deep dive on specific zones. So try to remember why the hell you did all the things you did. Good luck with that. Yeah, and cool. And what I'll do is I'll cut this off here, and then I'll hit you up offline, and yeah, it'd be really cool to do it again sometime.
All right, great. Thanks, guys. This was a lot of fun. You guys have a good day, and chat with you guys soon.
Cool. Thank you very much, Vu.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye. Now, how do I log off this?
I'll just hit
Do I just
end.
close the window?
Yeah, I'll hit end.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.